It was a Tuesday evening, 1 week before my daughter Lena's wedding, when my phone buzzed with a text that stopped my heart. "Mom, please don't come," it read. "You're in a wheelchair now, and Julian's family, they'll feel awkward. I just want my wedding day to be perfect, no distractions." I sat there staring at the screen, the words blurring through tears I refused to let fall. My own daughter ashamed of me. Me, Evelyn, 67 years old, the woman who built a $1 million seafood empire from a single diner. I didn't reply. I didn't call. Instead, I wheeled myself to my desk, pulled out my will, and rewrote it. Everything. Every restaurant, every property, every cent I'd fought for over 30 years, I left to my son, Marcus. Not out of spite, but because he was the one who stayed, the one who never saw me as a burden. How does a mother end up here, erased from her daughter's biggest day? And what made me turn my back on her legacy? Let me tell you how it all began. 3 years ago, a car accident stole the use of my legs. At 64, I went from running a chain of seafood restaurants along the East Coast to navigating life in a wheelchair. My house by the ocean, where waves crash against the shore, holds memories of the empire I built from a single diner where I scrubbed floors and shucked oysters myself. Now at 67, my body's slower, but my mind hasn't missed a beat. I still sign contracts, review budgets, and spot errors in spreadsheets from my laptop. People forget that. They see the wheelchair and think I'm fading away. I'm not. My son never made that mistake. At 38, he's a gifted chef, the kind who can turn crab legs into something you'd frame on a wall. After the accident, he didn't wait for me to ask. He showed up with a duffel bag and a dog-eared cookbook saying, "I'll take the guest room." No big gestures, just quiet action. He cooks my meals, balances my checkbook, and lifts me into bed when my arms give out. He could have been running one of my restaurants, but he chose me. His wife walked out because of it, said he was throwing his life away. He never told me. I only found out when I saw divorce papers in the trash. My daughter, 35, is all shine and ambition. She's an event planner, the kind who makes galas look like they just happen. She handles marketing for the restaurants, or at least part of it, and loves the spotlight. Her face is on magazine covers, her name splashed across our website. She calls herself the future of the business, but she hasn't come home in months. When she visits, it's brief. A bouquet of lilies, a quick kiss, then back to the city. I let it go. My voice isn't strong enough for arguments, and I'm saving my energy. What nobody knows is that every restaurant, every beachfront property, every investment account, it's all still mine. People assume I've passed things on, that I'm just a name on a plaque now. I'm not. I've been watching quietly from this chair. My son sees me as his mother, not a problem to solve. My daughter? I'm starting to think she sees me as a flaw in her perfect brand. She hasn't said it outright, but I feel it in her hurried glances, her talk of modernizing the business, like I'm something to be archived. I fought too hard to let my life's work slip away, but I never imagined my own daughter would be the one pushing me out. That text about her wedding wasn't where it started. It was just the moment I stopped pretending everything was okay. Things started shifting when my daughter got engaged. Her fiancé, Julian, was a real estate developer, the kind of man who wore tailored suits and carried a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He came from old money, the sort with family crests and summer homes in the Hamptons. The first time he visited my house, he shook my hand like I was a business associate, calling me the founder with a nod to my wheelchair. Not once did he asked how I was doing. Instead, he scanned the dining room, noting the view of the ocean like he was appraising it for sale. My daughter beamed beside him, her hand on his arm, already planning their perfect future. I saw her eyes flicker when he mentioned streamlining the restaurant chain. I didn't like the word, but I stayed quiet. Julian had ideas, and my daughter drank them in. He told her the restaurants needed a modern face, something sleek to attract younger crowds. She started rebranding, new logos, new ads, a website that looked like it belonged to a tech startup. I noticed my name disappearing from the About Us page. It used to read, "Founded by a single mother with a dream and a recipe for crab bisque." Now it was just a coastal legacy. My son caught it first, one night while spooning soup into my bowl. "They've erased you, Mom," he said, his voice low, like he didn't want to believe it. I nodded, swallowing the hurt. My daughter didn't ask my opinion. She didn't need to. Julian had convinced her I was a relic, a story better left in the past. It wasn't just the business. My daughter started pulling away bit by bit. She stopped calling to check in, stopped mentioning me in her interviews. Once, during a video call with the marketing team, she laughed and said, "Oh, the restaurants are practically mine now." She didn't know I was listening, unmuted in the background. My son was there, folding napkins at the kitchen table. I saw his jaw tighten, but he didn't say a word. He just kept folding, like if he stayed busy, the sting would fade. I wanted to tell him it wasn't his job to fix this, but my throat felt too heavy. Julian's influence grew. He started joining board calls, offering strategic input on things he barely understood. My daughter hung on his every word, quoting him like he'd invented the wheel. They planned a lavish wedding, the kind with chandeliers and custom cocktails. I overheard her tell a friend, "It's got to be flawless. Julian's family expects perfection." That's when I started to feel like a smudge on her vision. She never said it outright, but I saw it in the way she avoided talking about me, the way she changed the subject when Julian asked about the family side of the business. My son tried to talk to her once, over the phone. "You're forgetting Mom," he said, his voice steady but firm. She snapped back, "You're just a cook, Marcus. You don't get what it takes to build a brand." I heard the call end. My son stood at the sink, rinsing a plate for longer than he needed to. His hands were shaking. I didn't confront her. Instead, I did what I've always done when things get shaky. I checked my foundations. I called my lawyer, had him pull every contract, every deed, every account. I wasn't making changes, not yet. I just needed to know my empire was still mine. And it was. Every restaurant, every property, every dollar sat under my name, untouched. My daughter thought she was running Thai. Every dollar sat under my name, untouched. My daughter thought she was running the show, but she wasn't. I was still the one holding the keys, and I wasn't ready to let them go. Not yet. But I could feel the tide turning, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold it back. The text came on a quiet Tuesday evening, 1 week before my daughter's wedding. I was in the living room, the ocean humming outside, when my phone lit up. Her words were like a knife. "Mom, please don't come. You're in a wheelchair now, and Julian's family, they'll feel awkward. I just want my wedding day to be perfect, no distractions." I read it again, then a third time, hoping I'd misunderstood. I hadn't. My own daughter, the girl I'd raised through late-night fevers and school plays, was ashamed of me, not because of who I was, but because of a wheelchair. I didn't cry. I didn't call her back. I just sat there, the weight of her words pressing into my chest like a stone. I wheeled myself to the kitchen, where my son was chopping onions for dinner. "Marcus," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "pack what matters. We're leaving." He looked at me, his knife pausing mid-cut, but he didn't ask why. He just nodded, wiped his hands, and started pulling suitcases from the closet. We moved that night to a small apartment a few miles down the coast, a place with wide doorways for my chair and a kitchen that caught the morning sun. I brought one thing from the old house, a faded photo of me at 35 standing in front of my first restaurant, hair tied back, eyes fierce. That woman built everything I had. She wasn't going anywhere. We didn't tell anyone where we went. Not my daughter, not her assistant, not even my lawyer. I needed space to think, to breathe. The next morning, I sat by the window, the photo propped on the table, and made a call to my bank. I wasn't changing anything yet, but I needed to know every account, every deed was still mine. They were. My daughter thought she'd pushed me out of her story, but she didn't know the half of it. That text wasn't just a rejection. It was the moment I realized I'd been holding on to a family that didn't exist anymore, and I wasn't going to let her rewrite my ending. In the new apartment, with the ocean whispering through the open window, I found clarity. My daughter's text wasn't just a rejection. It was a line drawn in the sand. I didn't want to fight her, but I wasn't going to let her erase me, so I called my lawyer. Not to vent or cry, but to do what I'd always done, protect what I'd built. Sitting at the kitchen table, with that old photo of me in front of my first restaurant staring back, I rewrote my will. Every restaurant, every beachfront property, every investment account, millions of dollars I'd poured my life into, I left to my son, Marcus. Not because I was angry, but because he was the one who stayed. The one who cooked my meals, lifted me when I couldn't, and never once made me feel like less than his mother. I signed the papers slowly, my hands trembling not from weakness, but from the weight of it all. It was done, legal, airtight, final. I didn't tell anyone, not even Marcus. I sent a polite card to my daughter's wedding, wishing her joy, and let her think I'd accepted her terms. She didn't need to know yet. The wedding came and went. Chandeliers, custom cocktails, photos, flooding social media with her in a dress that cost more than my first car. I didn't look at them. Marcus didn't either. We spent that day unpacking the apartment, arranging pots in the kitchen, hanging my photo on the wall. Life moved on, quiet but steady. Then came the moment she found out. A week after her honeymoon, my daughter tried to sign a contract to open a new restaurant in the city. She called it her expansion, something she and Julian had pitched to investors. The lawyer called her back, voice flat. "You don't have authorization. All assets are under new management." She laughed at first, thinking it was a mistake. Then she checked the company records. Her name wasn't on a single deed, a single account. Everything, every key, every dollar belonged to Marcus. I'd made him the sole heir, the acting owner, the one with the pen. She called me, her voice sharp with panic. I didn't answer. I'd said all I needed to in that will. Her world unraveled fast. The board stopped taking her calls. Investors pulled out when they learned she had no real power. Julian, her perfect husband, started staying late at the office, his smiles growing colder. Then one morning, she woke up to find half her jewelry gone, her personal savings drained, and a note from Julian. "I need space." He'd taken what he could and left her with nothing but a leased apartment she couldn't afford. She posted a photo online, standing in front of a sunset captioned, "New Beginnings." Nobody commented. The likes trickled in, then stopped. The world she'd built on appearances was crumbling, and she had no one to blame but herself. Marcus, meanwhile, stepped into his role without a fuss. He didn't gloat or make speeches. He just started running the restaurants, tweaking recipes, renegotiating leases, and listening to the staff. In his first month, he boosted profits by 10%, something my daughter had never done. Suppliers called him the real deal. Customers raved about the crab bisque he brought back from my old menu. He didn't need a spotlight. He just needed the work to be done right. I watched him from the apartment, tracking numbers on my laptop, feeling something close to peace. Not joy, not yet, but the kind of calm that comes when you know you've made the right call. My daughter tried to fight it. She called board members, emailed lawyers, even showed up at one of the restaurants demanding answers. Nobody budged. The papers were clear. the transfer legal. She'd assumed the empire was hers because she'd posed for the photos, but she'd never held the deeds. I'd never given them to her. I'd let her believe she was in charge, and that was my mistake. But I wasn't going to let it be my legacy. Marcus had earned it, not by asking, but by showing up day after day when nobody else did. I kept that photo of my younger self on the kitchen wall, a reminder of the woman who built this life. My daughter thought she could erase me from her story, but she didn't know the truth. I was the one writing the ending, and I'd chosen the one who never asked me to disappear. 3 months after the wedding, I was in the apartment's small kitchen, the smell of Marcus's clam chowder filling the air, when the doorbell rang. Marcus glanced at me, his eyes asking if I wanted him to answer. I nodded. He opened the door, and there she was, my daughter, standing in the hallway, no makeup, no designer coat, just a faded sweater and a backpack. Her eyes were red, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked like a stranger, not the polished event planner who'd once graced magazine covers. "I need to see Mom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus stepped aside, but I saw the way his shoulders stiffened. He didn't trust her. Neither did I, not yet. She walked in, her gaze darting to the photo of me on the wall, the one from my first restaurant. "Mom," she started, then stopped like the words were stuck. "Julian's gone. He took everything, my savings, my jewelry, even the car. I was wrong. About the wedding, about you, about all of it. I'm sorry." Her voice cracked, and for a moment I saw the little girl who used to beg me to braid her hair. But I wasn't ready to soften. "You made a choice," I said, my tone even. "You told me I didn't belong in your life because of this chair. That's not something you fix with an apology." She flinched, but she didn't argue. She just stood there, waiting. I could have sent her away. Part of me wanted to, but she was still my daughter, and I wasn't going to let her sleep on the street. "You can stay," I said finally. "But not as a guest. You help, you clean, you cook, you do what Marcus does. No title, no keys, no promises." She nodded, her eyes on the floor. Marcus showed her to a corner of the living room where we'd set up a fold-out cot. She didn't complain. That night she washed the dishes, without being asked, her hands moving slowly, like she was relearning how to be useful. The days that followed were quiet. She didn't talk much, just did what needed doing. She swept the floors, folded towels, and helped Marcus carry groceries. Once, when he was at the restaurant, she sat with me while I sorted bills, holding papers so I could read them without straining. She didn't ask about the business, didn't touch my laptop, didn't post a single photo online. One morning, I saw her decline a call from a reporter who'd once interviewed her for a lifestyle magazine. She didn't explain, just put the phone down and went back to scrubbing the sink. Marcus kept his distance at first. I could see it in the way he avoided her eyes, the way he'd leave the room when she entered. But one evening, after she'd spent an hour organizing the pantry, he left a mug of coffee on the counter with a post-it note that said, "Drink." She stared at it for a long time before picking it up. That was the first crack in the wall between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a start. She started small, proving herself in ways I hadn't expected. When the apartment's porch light flickered out, she fixed it without being told, balancing on a stepladder Marcus had left behind. When I struggled to reach a glass from the cupboard, she handed it to me without a word, steadying my hand when it shook. I didn't thank her. I didn't need to. She wasn't doing it for praise. She was doing it because she'd finally seen what it meant to show up. One night Marcus came home late from the restaurant, his apron still tied on. She was in the kitchen, portioning leftovers into containers the way he liked. He paused in the doorway, watching her, then said, "You don't have to do that." She didn't look up. "I want to," she said, her voice soft but firm. He nodded and walked away, but I saw his shoulders relax, just a little. Something was shifting, not loudly but steadily, like the tide outside our window. I let her stay, not because she deserved it, but because I believed people could earn their way back. She wasn't my daughter, the event planner, anymore, not the one who'd pushed me out for a perfect wedding. She was just Lena, trying to rebuild what she'd broken, one small act at a time. And I was watching, not with hope, but with the kind of patience I'd learned from 30 years of building something from nothing. Months passed, and the rhythm of our little apartment by the ocean settled into something steady, almost peaceful. Marcus ran the restaurants with a quiet strength, not chasing headlines but earning respect from suppliers, staff, and customers who came back for his crab bisque and stayed for the warmth of a place that felt like home. He didn't need to prove himself. He just did the work, the way he'd always done for me. My daughter stayed on, sleeping on that fold-out cot in the living room, sweeping floors, and helping Marcus with small tasks without ever asking for more. She didn't move out, didn't try to reclaim her old life. She just kept showing up day after day in a way I hadn't seen since she was a child. One evening, I called them both to the kitchen. The photo of me at my first restaurant hung on the wall, its edges curling from the salty air. I looked at them. Marcus, his hands still smelling of garlic from the restaurant, and my daughter, her eyes tired but clear. "This isn't a family meeting," I said, my voice calm but firm. "It's a truth I need you to hear. Marcus, you got everything because you never asked me to disappear. You saw me, not the chair, not the business, just me. That's why the restaurants, the properties, the accounts, they're yours." He nodded, his face unreadable, but I saw. His fingers tighten around the edge of the table. I turned to my daughter. "You're here because you came back, because you're trying. That matters. But you lost something you can't get back, not because I'm cruel, but because you chose a life that didn't include me. You can stay as long as you keep earning it." She didn't speak, just nodded, her hands folded in her lap. There were no tears, no promises, just a quiet understanding that this was the new shape of our family. A few days later, I was sorting through old recipe cards from my mother, the ones that started it all, scrawled notes for chowder and lobster rolls. Tucked between two yellowed pages, I found a slip of paper in her handwriting. "Leave your world to the one who stays when you're at your lowest." I read it twice, then tucked it into a notebook I kept for Marcus. It wasn't about favoritism or revenge. It was about truth. He'd stayed through the hospital stays, the sleepless nights, the moments when I felt like a shadow of myself. He never made me feel small. Family isn't the perfect photos you post online or the stories you tell to impress strangers. It's the people who sit with you when the world feels heavy, who lift you when you can't stand. I learned that too, late for some things, but not too late to make it right. I left everything to Marcus because he never asked me to be anything but his mother. So what would you do in my place? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone, and if this story hit you, stick around for more. Life's got a way of teaching us what matters most.